Thank
Hello.
you so much for joining us. In honor of Women's History Month and International Women's Day, Acker is thrilled to present our Women in Wine series available to stream on our Instagram and YouTube channels. So please subscribe to experience all of our incredible content. We've now reached the end of the month and we're at our final interview. My name is Lily Mirabelle Friedman and I'm honored to be joined today by one of the most treasured personalities in the wine world, renowned importer and film producer Martine Saunier. Thank you so much for joining us today, Martine. Where are you joining us from?
From California, from San Francisco.
How are you doing so far in 2021?
Well, the good news, I got vaccinated. So that allows me now to leave the house and maybe fly someplace.
Where is first? Where do you want to go first?
Oh, I'm going to Los Angeles next Friday for a birthday party. And, why not?
Hopefully you'll drink something good there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to Spago, so it's got a very good setup.
They sure do. And there's still lots of fun things to find there. So let's start the conversation with your past, since so much of our past dictates our future. I know that you grew up in a very different time in France. And what was your dream job growing up? Since I don't know if wine importer was on the radar for you.
Was not at all on the radar because, I was 5. It was in 1939. My father had to go to the army again. So he took all the family, the 2 grandmother and my mother, to Burgundy and left us. And he said, I'll see you when I see you. So, 3 months later, we heard from him. He was in Paris and he said to my mother, you come and join me and leave Martine where she is. So I left. She left and I stayed with my 2 grandmothers, my 2 and my 3 uncles. And I was the only child. And, I played with the kids from the farmer. And I learned about making butter, cheese, drinking wonderful milk, and eating fresh vegetables. And of course, wine was not in my spectrum. So going back, in 1943, in 1942, I came back to Paris, went to school, and then through Red Cross, they sent me back to Burgundy for the summer because Burgundy was in a free zone. So we had to go through the border with the German. And then I spent the summer and I got really happy to be there because I could eat. And the only preoccupation was, what are we going to eat? Especially, in Paris was absolutely awful. The school had no food. We were given vitamin C biscuit, and that was it. So, I dreamt of food, and in 1944, I refused to go to Burgundy for the holidays because we heard the American had landed in Home Beach. And so I said to my parents, this time you're not going to get rid of me. So I stayed with them, and the bombing and everything, we're going to survive or not. And then in 1945, after the German left, all family went to Burgundy in the summer, and it was my first harvest. And I was 10 years old, and that's where I thought wine was a very good thing because I followed the winemaker and I learned about harvesting, picking up grapes, the fermentation tank, the crushing, how to bottle, how to clean barrel, how to recognize malolactic by putting your ear on the barrel, and the winemaker will say, did you hear anything? Yes. Oh, well, it's still fermenting. The mallow is not over. So that, and then I had a job to go to the wine cellar to take some wine, bottle some wine for the family meal, and a little rubber tube hanging on the wall. I put it in a barrel, and I stuck it and put it in a bottle. And then, I was told you go deep, not too deep, but not too high because there are some flowers over there. So anyway, but it was very pure wine. There was no treatment of any kind. and we bottle ourselves with the cork floating in a lotion in a pan of water with a little vinegar to make it clean, and then we'll put it by hand and hammer it, and then that was it. And the then quantity of wine, all the barrels were bought by a negociant. We only kept what we needed for ourselves. So, every year after that, I went to Burgundy the whole summer, Easter time, the summertime. But of course, September was the exciting time because we harvested, and our neighbors, kids, and so forth were coming over, and we all worked. We were not paid a nickel, I promise you. And we had to be at 7 o'clock in a vineyard, whether rain or shine. It was a very exciting time for the kids. But I was the only one who really stayed up until 1 o'clock in the morning to do the crushing. And nobody said, "Where is Martine?" No, I was left alone, and I was pushing the bar and listening to everything and tasting everything. And then in 1947, it was a very, very good year. And the whole family was away, and I stayed, and I wanted to see the crushing. The wine, the red wine was falling into a tank, wooden tank, and everybody came and said, "It's wonderful." And I tasted, I had a silver Tastevin from my uncle, and I tasted, and then all of a sudden I felt dizzy. So I said, So I left, went to the kitchen, and cut myself some bread, some salami, some cheese, and ate, and then finally I felt good, and how I learned the danger of over drinking. It never happened again, but you know what? I'm not the only one, because Lalou Bisnois had the same experience, she told me. So, it's how we learn. So, and then, I really took an interest in wine, and some friends of my aunt came. It was a elderly lady. She had a Beaujolais in Chenas. Chenas is a very good wine, Moulin Vent, a Grand Cru Beaujolais. No label, just choke, 1929. And then we pulled the cork, and I thought, "Oh my God." And we didn't drink the whole bottle. So she said, "Well, I leave you the rest of the bottle, but you give me back the bottle when it's empty," because we couldn't find glass, So we recycled all the bottle. So, but I went that night, I had more wine of this one, and I thought, this is absolutely amazing. So, and then I learned, I was drinking only local wines, and maybe some Côte Rôtie and Hermitage, because my father collected a little bit, but nothing from Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit. It's just only Beaujolais, Great Beaujolais, Great Côte Rôtie. But that's my only experience. Anyway, I went to business school, and because I wanted to go to art school, and my father said, "Oh, you should make a living, have something more secure." So he sent me for 2 years business school. And I went to England for 2 years and became a translator, edited a magazine, and then came back. And of course, the only thing I wanted on earth is to travel. So I started to travel and became a ground hostess for British Airways. Then finally, I worked for KLM in the office. And then I opened Japan Airlines in 1961, the flight over the North Pole. And I was in charge of all the PR, all the press, and even took all the official, the CAB manager and everything, to Japan. And the Japanese respected me very highly. And I was very surprised because there was no other woman in, having anything to do with management. But so then I was hired away by another airline, Swissair, and I became totally the official PR and press for Swissair. And the first time, my first day at Swissair, there was a crash. I came in the office and the general manager said, Mademoiselle Saunier, you better go to work. We had a crash last night. And I tell you, that in a million years, I would have never expect on the first day of a job, but it's like winning the lottery. How do you expect it? That was, and I realized that I was able to manage to be diplomatic, to face the music, as we say. And then I came to America in 1964, married a doctor. And in that process, he had many friends, Dr. Friend who collected California Cabernet, and some French also. But they wanted me to try the Cabernet. And one day they wanted to blind test me because they thought, well, you're French, you must know about wine. And they served me a wine and I said, what is it? I said, it's with Martini Cabernet Sauvignon. I had it already and it always tastes the same. And he said, why does it? Well, because the wine is probably pasteurized, And so, and then I was curious about wine in California. So I decided to go to Beaulieu because that was my first choice. I loved the Beaulieu Cabernet. And I drove by alone and I went and knocked on the door and who is there? André Tchetchev. And of course he was delighted because I was French and he studied in Bordeaux and he said, oh, look, my darling, in French, let's go out. And he took me to the vineyard and he said, the soil is not made for Cabernet, for Pinot Noir here. If you want Pinot Noir, it's not the climate, it's not the soil. You got to go and get it from Burgundy. And I thank him for his good word. And I then, my doctor friend decided that maybe I should look for French wine in California, in San Francisco. And it was a disaster because the wine came from England mostly, from Bristol, and there was no storage, and the wine didn't travel by, proper refrigerated container. So I had a kind of a few words with the importer and the merchant. And then I met another importer who said, look, I have the best Burgundy. I want you to try and give you a sample of all the wine, different appellations. I said, fine. And he came back a month later and he said, what do you think? I said, your wine tastes terrible. And he said, how dare you? I said, you ask me a question, I give you the answer. But I said, I can't understand why we don't have wines from small estates. I'm sure there are plenty of Burgundian wineries I would love to sell to America. And he looked at me and he said, why don't you go and buy for me? I have a retail license, so you can sell retail. And I said, okay. So in 1969, I was my first trip to Burgundy, but I decided also to go to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and I didn't know anybody. I went to a restaurant, and I wanted to drink a very nice white Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And I was given a Côte du Rhône, Chateau de Fonsalette from Rayas. And the owner of the pas mal, huh? So the owner of the restaurant said, you don't know Chateau Rayas? I said, no, where is it? So she gave me a description. She said, he makes the best. So at 2:00, I ventured to Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And trust me, it was the hardest vineyard ever to find. So I finally got there. There's nobody at the winery. I went to the main house and the lady at the door said, Monsieur Reynaud is having a siesta. He'll be up in an hour or so. So I sat outside and I waited, and the truck came because he was going to pick up some wine from the winery, and he sat with me, and we were all waiting for Mr. Reynaud to get up. And he went, and he was a small man, absolutely charming, took me to his cellar, and it was 2 long caves full of wine, packed. He gave me a dirty glass with no stem, it was broken. And he served me a 1959 And I thought I had my mouth full of this gorgeous wine. And I said, oh, I cannot believe what am I drinking. This is absolutely extraordinary. He said, well, I have another one for you. So there was a 61. So I drank the 61. It was even greater than the 59. I don't know which one. I said, look, I buy 25 cases of each. For. It was the price was $2.50 a bottle. It was anyway. So my first trip was, a few local wine, and then my Burgundy, my Chateau du Pape. And when I came home, I told the importer what I did. He said, $2.50 you at the property? But he said, you don't know what you're doing. $2.50 is a retail price in California for a Chateau du Pape. But I said, it's nothing like mine. I mean, it's not like yours, this crooked bottle or whatever you sell it. So he said, well, if you don't sell it, you will have to pay for it. Well, I made a list of doctors and lawyers, and I sent it on off. One doctor tried the wine, he told the other doctor, whoop, it was gone. And it's how Monsieur Renault started his career in America. So anyway, that's how it happened. And, really what my first experience started in Mâcon, Beaujolais, but then I moved to Côte de Beaune, and then I moved to Côte de Nuit. And my first time in Centenay, which was the first village in Côte de Beaune, people were, the winemakers were looking at me like, where you come from? What have you been doing? So I said, I've come from Mâcon. I always made wine when I was a kid. I know exactly. Okay. And I was very surprised because those Burgundian males would say, I think my wife has a better palate than I have. They all said that, not only one. They all recognized that their wife had a better palate. So I had absolutely no problem at all. And furthermore, I knew exactly what the wine should taste. Even so, I didn't know the wine in particular. I could, I don't know. That was my gift. And
you grew up with it. But like that story with Chateau Rayas and having the Foncelette Blanc in Chateau
yes.
Cup, do you have another similar story where you had kind of a wine that was handed to you, you tasted, and you were like, I must have this in my portfolio?
Well, Henri Jaillet, of course.
I knew that's what I was leading the witness to that answer.
But Henri, I met him in California. He came with another producer that made fabulous wine. It was Henri Pillot with Chassagne La Romanée. I had marvelous wine also. I must have this wine. And he said, oh, do you want, and he introduced me to other wineries. But I made a broker who said, oh, I'm retiring from my business, and I know a winemaker, maybe you like to meet him. So I went, and it was Henri Jaillet. But I had previously, from my guy in Chassagne-Montrachet, Henri Pillot, he came to America on a trip organized, because you see, most of the Burgundians sold their wine to England.
Yeah.
So it was Harvey Nichols, I think, that organized the trip. So he called me from San Francisco, we have an afternoon free. Can I bring a winemaker from Burgundy? He's by himself, he's kind of, shy. And can we bring it to your house? I said, sure. So here came Henri Jaillet in my little house in Mill Valley, very proper, very lovely smile. And he gave me his card. He said, I would love to see you when you come to Burgundy. So exactly, that's what happened. I tasted his wine for the first time. It was the 1972 vintage, which was not a great vintage, but his wines were so delicious. That was my start with Henri Jaillet, and he's been my mentor after that. And, his wine was so fabulous, and no filtration, which I thought was fantastic. So after that, trust me, Every winemaker in Burgundy knew Martine doesn't want filtration. She's mad. I said, no, I'm not mad. You're going to do what I tell you. And I had to fight for that. Oh, gosh.
Were there other, you just mentioned that Henri Jaillet was your mentor. How did he mentor you and what was his influence on your career?
Well, this influence was, he explained the way he made wines, because you see, I came from a time, I started with was no chemical, no fertilizer. Everything was handmade. And then in the 60s, late 50s, the chemical came. They gave weed killers, Plan Droit, which is a clone that go a little higher than the little Pinot Noir. So what happened, the winemaker doesn't have to break his back, and he produces beautiful big grapes, make a lot of juice, but lousy wine. So I learned this is not right. You have to, I had to watch for who is replanting, and it was recommended by the Appellation Contrôlée in Beaune. You know, they made a mistake there. So anyway, but Henri was, you know, he told me all about the planting, the care, you know. He said it has to be like a garden. On each plant, each vine, you know, it was for him, and he had planted at that time, maybe 10 years or 15 years before I came along, he had planted the Vaune Romanée Croparentou, which was a deserted, it was not a vineyard, it was brushes on rocks, and it used to be
Cabbages, right?
no, they did plant Jerusalem artichoke. So that was it. So he replanted.
French word, though.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, he had to dynamic the vineyard because it was full of rocks and so on. He had in his mind the possibility, because of the exposure of the soil. And Vaune Romanée Croparentou is a cool climate, north exposure, and that what made the difference. So from 72 to 79, 72 to 77, we never had Croparentou appellation. It was blended with a Vaune Romanée village. In 1978, he said, now is the time for me to give the wine its own label. And this is how Croparentou came the first time on the market. I had started my winery, my importing business in 1979. And, you know, I went to see Henri and I tasted this wine and I said, oh my word, this is unbelievable. And I said, I want 2 cases of each in January. And then after that, I could, because, you know, nobody knew Henri. So I never forgot how I went to my first in Los Angeles. I had Greenblatt on Sunset Boulevard, and Kevin, the owner. So on a Monday morning, I have a Richebourg in my bag, a bottle of Richebourg, and I'm fighting against all the guys, you know, that are big national distributor, and they look at me like, oh, is she? And, you know, and there is pastrami and salami behind hanging, and it smells like, you know, a grocery store.
Yeah.
So I did a plastic cup, you know, so like 2 inches high, and everybody. So I put my drop of Richebourg, and Kevin smelled it, and he said, where on earth did you find this wine? And I said, well, you know, it's just a little guy in Vaune Romanée. So I said, wait a minute. So he disappeared. And I tell you what, the smell of the wine took over the pastrami smell. It was so amazing. He came back and he said, I buy 2 cases of this, 3 cases of that. I sold about 10 cases in 5 minutes. And everybody's looking at me, who is this woman with this wine? You know, it was so funny. So anyway, and you know, the customer was a head of Capitol Record. He was Joe Smith. And Kevin called, and the secretary said, Mr. Smith is in a meeting. I can't disturb. He said, tell him it's an emergency. So Joe came on the phone and he said, is your wife sick? He said, is it okay? No, it's fine. But I just tasted the greatest Burgundy I ever had. And he said, well, buy it all. And it's how later on, I met Joe and all the wine group from Los Angeles called the Wide World of Wine, and they all were great collectors from all the movie business, music business. So, and I had also, in those days, there were very few collectors when I started. And so I decided to, because of my background in advertising and press, to send my wine sample to the press. And I had the Underground Wine Journal, and they were all collectors, and they gave 19.5 points to the Gros Parentout. And then I met Nate Croman after many months of trying from the LA Time, and he wrote a quarter or half a page in the LA Time. Martine Saunier is her name, and Burgundy is her name. So that did it, and it spread all around the country. And then I started to expand. I was very happy with my little California business, but then after that, I had to move around and visit, find distributor, flying here, giving tasting. My last finally went to New York. And, I started, there was no computer.
Yeah.
You have to realize, no computer. The inventory was recorded on a card. We typed, where I had bought my first typewriter with a ball. Olivetti, it was $1,500. That's a big expense. And I had a sublet, a little office at his brother Coffee, and in a very bad neighborhood, so we had to lock ourselves up. Still you laugh, but and we did a catalog, and I had the picture of every winery with the label, and I had my price catalog, and how I started selling wine. And people say, "Oh, I have seen that label before," and I said, the label book was really a great asset, and I wrote little article, made my little booklet with my wine, and that's how I sold. And for 3 years, I was by myself selling wine until the rumor came, and I had a lot of applicants. They wanted to work with me. Please, I want to work for you. I love your wine. And I was really, so I grew nicely and slowly. And, you asked me, how did I start and what was my scariest experience? In 1978, I think I was in Burgundy in September, and I met my father for the last time, and I told him I was going to start my company, and he was totally amazed. He said, "You sure? Are you going to do that?" Of course, I had no money, so absolutely no money. So I took a second mortgage on my house, and I got it back. From 8.5%, I went to 11.5%. And all my friends said, "Martine, you should not do that." I said, "Yes, if I lose my house, I live in an apartment. I know it's going to be good." And it was, nothing could stop me. I knew it was so exciting to present new wineries to the consumer, because they were only knowing Burgundy through the negociant. There's a few wine here and there from Schlumberger or whatever, but there was not really any market here for small winery. I can tell you, every time I went at 2:30 in the afternoon in a restaurant where all the national distributor salespeople were red faces, drinking their stuff, I will bring and I will tell the owner, I have the Chassagne Morachet. Oh, 2 cases. I never had a Chassagne. I didn't know it could taste like that. And you could see the faces of those guys. But they had all, I was only in a man's world. Every salespeople was a man at that time.
That was my next question. So working as a woman in both the US and France, were there any very noticeable differences? You said that in France, everyone gave you lots of respect because they knew that their wives had better palates.
And then I'll tell you something. It happened also in America because I knew what I was talking about, and the proof was in a glass, and nobody could put me down. And also, after I started my company, I was meeting. Sometimes you had dinner next to a guy from another company, and they all had bets that in 6 months I'll be over. It will be over. They didn't believe that I could do it. Women came later as salesperson, but I think the big national company thought women will have sexy, good looking, talking a lot, not knowing their stuff. It was really bad. I was embarrassed, but fortunately it changed. It changed, but honestly, it was not at the beginning. They thought, well, she's still successful, she must be because she's good looking or whatever. Nothing to do with my knowledge. And also, I can tell you, I saw a lot of women that were asked to talk about wine. They had no clue what they were talking about. They were just saying, but this is a wine, and it's come from there. And it's very nice. And they had no background. That's it. I'm here with my bottle.
It's great.
But I have to tell you, I met a woman before she became a winemaker. It was Selma Long. I met Selma Long with her parents, or in-laws rather, and her husband, Bob Long. And she was a nutritionist. And she was taking classes at Davis to be an enologist. And I followed her, and we became friends. And I saw her, she was at Mondavi, she was at, she had a terrific career, and she was really a great asset to our ladies. But what I was going to say is I had an experience with a winery in the 80s, late 80s. I had a winery whose winemaker was hired by the Hospice de Beau, because the winemaker from the Hospice de Beau, André Porchonnet, was hired away by La Louise Leroy. So this winery said to me, panic, my winemaker is going to the hospital, what am I going to do? And I said, I have somebody in mind. She's French, and she worked 2 years in California. She's a full-fledged writer. She's very good. And he said, no, you can't. He called me on the road driving, and he said, no, I can't have a woman. I said, well, my wife will not like that. I said, well, okay, I'm just going back to California. And then he definitely didn't find anybody, but he was insisting. So I was so mad. I wrote a letter, and I told my office to put it Federal Express overnight. And I said, this letter said, dear Mark, I'm so sorry that you feel you're so against a woman. Trust me, if I recommend her, it's because I know she's talentless. In fact, California winery kept her 2 years in charge of the vineyard on their prestigious winery. Now, in California or in America, we have women winemakers. Selma Long, for example, on Domaine Chandon had a woman winemaker. I mean, it's coming along. And the press is very kind to them, and they don't make any difference between whether it's a male or a female. As far as I'm concerned, this is the way I feel, and I want only to protect you because I want you to have a good winemaker. And I won. The next day, called me, okay, I will interview her. And she was hired. That my, I was so proud. And I tell you, she had the respect of everyone because at the tasting of Clos Vougeot, she had a piece of Clos Vougeot to take care. She won the tasting over all the producer of Clos Vougeot at that time. So that's cool. And you know, I met another fabulous woman, Lalou Vizleroy.
Yeah.
That's another trip in my another event.
I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about Lalou and her influence on you?
Lalou, you know, I was in Burgundy, and one of my collectors was also in Burgundy, and he had arranged through the sommelier from La Meloise, Monsieur Pertuzet, different booking of visit. So he had Ramonet, he had, of course, Jaillet was through me at that time, and he had Romanée Conti and Maison Leroy. So he called me and he said, Martine, I'm going to Maison Leroy. Would you like to join us? And I said, that's interesting. I like to go. So I canceled my appointment wherever, and then I went. And there is this wine, the cellar master, Toto Rajot, and the sommelier La Meloise, and my collector friend. And we tasted wines and so on. And Toto said to me, you seem to taste very well. I said, well, it's my business, you know. He said, really, what are you doing? I said, well, I import wines in America. And he said, really? Oh, Madame Leroy is looking for a warehouse to store wine. Do you know anything about it? I said, well, I had just bought my warehouse 2 years before. I said, yes. So give me your card. And then, you know, next day, my friend said, we're also going to DRC. And I said to myself, well, why not? Why don't I? You know, I've been to DRC a couple of times already. So I said, okay, I'll go to DRC. As I come into the winery, the secretary said to me, Madame Leroy would like you to call her in Océ du Reste. So I called her and she said, can we meet? Sure. So we met 2 days later on a Friday. And she said, I know what you're doing. You're importing the wine of Henri Jaillet. He said, last year, I was at a tasting of all the Vosne Romanée produced, you know, on the 78 vintage. And I tried the Vosne Romanée Cros Parentou. And I took my glass and I went to Aubert de Vilaine. Aubert, this is wine like this we should have made. And so we met. And I was, and you know, so she said, I need a warehouse. Do you know? I think there is one for sale next to mine. So fine. So she bought the place. But of course, you know, it's only a skeleton. There is this brand new place. There is no insulation, no refrigeration. So she asked somebody I didn't know to give her an estimate. It was $50,000 to install. And he said, what do you think? I said, well, I just did mine twice your size for 20,000. She said, really, can you handle it? So I became her manager.
You were like her contractor.
A contractor. And you know, we didn't have any computer. It was all telex. Every day she called me. I said, I did this, I did that. And you know, finally, the following March, she came over she transferred the wine from Wilson Daniel into her own place. And she said, I come in March and I'd like you to taste the wine with me. So here we are. And she opened Musigny, Chambertin, whatever. You know, I mean, great bottle. And she said, I was concerned because it seems that in Napa Valley, the wine was drying up. It was too hot. but they're all fine. So we're filling out the case. 2 drops with there, we speak. And I kept thinking, my God, what has happened to all those wine after, what's she going to do with it? So I said, Madame Leroy, I think I'll take you out to dinner tonight and we'll bring the wine. She said, in fact, we never do such a thing. I mean, we don't come to a restaurant. I said, not like those wine. Trust me, I will make sure. And we invited Jeremiah Tower. And he came on the 4 of the 3 of us. We had a fabulous meal in a French restaurant. And I tell you, on the next day, she said, do you think you would like to represent my wine? No, she said, I'm going to represent my wine. I said, well, you need a sales team. You need, representative. I said, and you have only your wines. You need several regions. So she asked me, I was begging, maybe she would choose me. And I said, yes, she did. When I started, my first customer was Jeremiah Tower. I went to see him at Star with a bottle of Bourgogne Rouge 78. And he said, at last, I'm going to try one of her wine. No sample had ever been shown on the market. Every time I brought a wine of La Louise-le-Roi, I had to say, who is she? She's a co-owner of La Romanée-Conti. If I didn't mention La Romanée-Conti, nobody on earth knew La Louise-le-Roi. Pretty amazing.
So the first wine that you brought as a sample of La Luz wines was 78 Bourgogne Rouge.
In 1987. And it was glorious. It was unbelievable. And she had a stock of like 10,000 bottles, whatever. I saw it everywhere. The wine was magic. Trust me, it was the card to enter an account. But I have to tell you also, when in 87, I had tasted the 85 vintage. I met her in 86. I tasted her wine in a barrel, Maison Leroy wine, 85. That was fantastic. And then she said, well, next year we're going to start in 87 in September. I send you some wine, and here is the allocation, and you decide what you can do with that. And she wanted to know. And I look at the prices. Already, Chambertin was twice the price of what was on the market. Instead of, let's say, $500 a case, it was $1,250 a case. And I can say, I'm done. I'm going to lose my business. And nobody will buy those. Everything was like, whoop, 25% off. And then Robert Parker called me and he said, I want to go and visit Madame Leroy. Can you get an appointment? So I gave him an appointment I think in June 87. When he came back, he said, be ready, the wine are fabulous. So, I said, okay. So the letter appeared on the market in August. The phone didn't stop ringing. And I was by myself and I sold $500,000 of wine in 1 week. I couldn't stop taking orders. Woof.
So I think the perfect question to ask after that is, you've been in the wine business for many, many years now, and you're still in the wine business somewhat. How do you keep your motivation going? How do you stay motivated now?
The motivation that I sold my company in 2013, but I was retained as an advisor for a few years. And when, I still go to the meeting, and I'm still tasting the wine. I see the new wineries coming along. Of course, Leroy is still there, and in Rayas is gone. But all my winery. Sometimes I'm on the fourth generation, and I tell you, each generation is different. When you change, the son takes over. He wants to have his own label. He wants to do this. He wants to do that. We go through growing pains of, a kid going to school That's it. But everything, I'm just, I developed a very friendly, amicable relationship with my winery. I mean, some of them I'm still in touch. I'm just like, it's like my family, I've seen the kid get married, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. So it's marvelous. I mean, it's such a part of my life. Now, how can I expect to have such a fabulous life? I mean, and I met so many interesting people. When I started Leroy, for example, I had wine dinner in those days because in spite of everything, the wine were still so good, but not outrageously expensive. So I could put it in a dinner. And many customer came to me and he said, where on earth did you find those wines? They're wonderful. And it was so extraordinary to get in recognition for such great wines that people understood the difference, were so excited to buy them. That's what get me going. And I still excited when somebody wants even a plain muscadet or, some plain Burgundy from a, like Marsanais, but nobody knew Marsanais when I started. What is that? They didn't even have an appellation in those days. It's so exciting. And, to find what really excited me is when I met for the first time a young winemaker that will take over the winery and to find a talent. This kid is going to make it. I feel the discovery was extraordinary. It's like, if you deal with art, you see a painter and you have the feeling this guy is going to do it. It was the same with wine. It is a talent. Not everybody can make good wines. That's not, no. You have to have the knack, the passion. And I tell you, I had one winery, Denis Mortet, who unfortunately passed away. We always tried, the two of us, and I could tell him everything that I thought was not correct. And he never raised an eyebrow like, oh, what does he? Yes, you're right, he would say. Yes, he will register and it will just go on him. Finally, we had a discussion about this Chambertin. I said, Denis, you don't have many rows of that Chambertin. It goes from the top to bottom, but you have about 3 climates. But I think you should take care of the vineyard yourself. Each plant has to have your attention. You have to keep it. You control the pruning. You control everything. And he did. And you know what? When it finally did, we tasted the wine and we look at each other. Here you go. That's it. You made it.
Have there been any, since you've seen so many generations of so many great winemaking families, have you ever seen or stopped a terrible thing from happening when they were going to do something wrong to the wine, or the next generation wanted to change the label?
No, you know what? The thing is, what is extraordinary is the next generation. If I go back in 69, between 69 and 70, the kids that took over were not world travel. They didn't own a passport. They didn't do anything except local, and they went to the viticulture school in Bonn. But they had no experience outside France. Their children then did travel. They had a passport. They went to Australia. They went to California. They went to New Zealand. And it opened their eyes. And they shared their knowledge from home with the knowledge of more technical winery, but it all fitted together. They profited from the exchange. And that was so important. And now, you know, the modern, Burgundian wineries has many things that they learn from abroad. And they learn a little bit of English, which helps a lot, because trust me, it's a bit difficult sometimes. Anyway, so, you know, I think that the world has opened to Burgundy, and, you know, Oregon, look at Oregon.
And look how many French producers are there.
Yes, I tell you. Yeah, they don't make Burgundy. They make Pinot Noir from Oregon. You see, you can't repeat, you cannot copy something. You have to have your own character. And the climate is closer to Burgundy, in fact, because you have the same length of time of sunshine and everything. But soil is not quite the same. And, you know, but they make very good wine. Very good wine. So it's been, you know, it's been remarkable how Oregon expanded. I mean, who would have believed it? I represented for years one of the wineries that started in the Ken Height. Ken Height example. Ken Height, he was not having his own winery, he was working for. So I tasted the wine. And he said, I know who you are. I took Denis Mortet, who wanted to try, you know, I was at the International Pinot Noir Conference, and they invited Denis to upon my recommendation. So I'm with him. And we had a telephone from a recommendation for Ken Hyde. And I went, and Denis said to me, ask him if we could have a bottle. I want to buy a bottle to take home. And Ken said, I'm sorry, I don't have anything, you know, to sell. And as I leave, he said, you have a card? I know your wine because I'm drinking your wine. I'm drinking your Meursault, I'm drinking your red Burgundy. Oh, I said, thank you. And so I come home, and I had a fax saying, it was nice meeting you. I just wonder if you could represent my wine in California. So I called him, are you kidding? I said, you want me to represent you? He said, yes. I said, well, let's see, how many cases you produce now, and where are you going with your wine? I said, I had a Parker review already. I said, yes, but Parker is not everything, you know. I mean, we need more. If you want to build your reputation, you need more exposure. We have to go to the wine, the Wine Spectator. No, I don't want to go there. Okay, fine. So 3 months later, I'm having dinner with a reviewer from California for the Wine Spectator, Jeff Morgan at that time. And he said, I had a very good tasting day with from Oregon wine, Pinot Noir. And he said, there is one, it's really terrific. He said, who is it? Ken Hyde. I said, it's my boy. I said, it's mine. And he said, anyway, it was an explosion, you know, it was like he had this whole article about him. He made the cover of Wine Spectator. I mean, he was on his way, and he grew, and he, you know, this is history now. But, you know, it's because I had this knowledge of the press, the influence of the press. You can't do it on your own. You have to have some support. But if the wine is good, it comes naturally, you know, but at least people know that you are around.
So you have so many great stories, but what is especially for the modern wine world, what is it that you love about the wine world today?
Well, I can see, I mean, look, there is more wine produced in France than ever. They have people coming out of the woodwork. I said, where they come from? You know, their father had a vineyard, but they went to the city and they became an engineer and everything. And then all of a sudden I said, well, maybe I should take over the vineyard. And, you know, you have all these small wineries that open, especially in the Loire region. It's been mind-boggling. And also in Burgundy, because you see a lot of vineyards were taken care by other people. like the winery would lease the land from an owner who lives in Paris, has nothing to do with wine. So everybody now, you have new label, new little winery producing wine. Alsace has come up with some fabulous wine. Champagne, when I started, I had, I didn't sell champagne for a while, but it's through a 3-star restaurant in France, in Vézelay, Marc Menot. The sommelier said to me, I want you to try this champagne. It's a small producer in Côte de Blanc. So I tried, and I said, okay, I'm going to visit him. And it was my first champagne. In those days, you had only the big brand. Yeah. 5, 6 champagne. That's it. I finally imposed my Chardonnay from Monsieur Desgaules, 100% Blanc de Blanc, Grand Cru, at l'Orangerie restaurant. There was a prestigious, by the glass, trust me. I mean, that was a success. See, all the restaurant, Le Dôme restaurant, also in those days. Anyway, and then when you see now the number of wine and new champagne on the market is scary. Now you go to a restaurant specialized in champagne, you have 4 pages of producer. And I tell you, not all of them are good. Some of them are very terrible. But it's because all those producers now were selling only the grapes. They had contracts, they sold the grapes. And they decided champagne is popular. Why don't we make our own champagne? Well, champagne, I would say, is more difficult to make than Burgundy or Bordeaux, so complex. So, and they go on the market, they take, they have a small importer that takes them. They don't realize the marketing, how long it takes. And there is a lot of wineries that are not going to make it. It's sad. It's sad. But champagne is a very difficult wine to make. And I love champagne. And, that has been I will always start after that from champagne down to Chablis, down to Burgundy, the Loire on the other side. And even, when I was starting, I always wanted to visit Cahors, the black wine. So I went, not knowing anybody. And I went to a restaurant and by myself. And the chef came to after the said, what are you doing in this part of the world? I look like this woman by herself. And I said, I'm looking for cow. Oh, I'm going to tell you. So he brought me some bottles. And he said, you visit those wineries? And he said, you like truffle? I said, oh, I know the truffle, Mr. Pébert. I will call them and they come right away to meet with you. Do you like Armagnac, La Ténarèse, that? And so all of a sudden I got to 3 guys, bottle of Armagnac, and I have an invitation to taste truffle the next day. Why not? But I tell you, I when I first started, I went to Bordeaux and I imported a few Bordeaux also. But I decided that since they have no exclusivity, it was not worth my time because everybody can sell it. So forget it, and I withdrew from Bordeaux. And that's why I focus on the rest of the country, especially Côte-Rôtie, Côte-du-Rhône, other places. It's been a great experience, really. I had a fabulous life, thanks to my wineries and my winemaker, and all the people I met in America that supported my book.
Well,
and it has been also very kind.
Yeah. Well, my next question will be, what do you think is in store for the future of the wine world?
Well, the future is going to expand, but to have more competition. You see, the Chinese starts to make good wine. New Zealand is making good wine. South America make good wine. I mean, where are those, who is going to drink those wine? So unless you make top quality wine, you're not going to succeed. And you have to establish a reputation. And not everybody is able to do it. It takes time. Now we have communication. We are on internet. But when I started, there was no internet. So it was more difficult. Now, boom. When the internet started, when I did my allocation of jaillet through restaurants, they will call to each other, like, Larry Stone will call a guy in New York. She gave me only 3 bottles. How many did you get? So, but now everybody is communicating. Everybody is telling, oh, I got this new wine. The only thing I think is different that the sommelier, go overboard because everybody wants a wine that they have discovered and is only them. And that is no good. That is no good. You have to have the quality. It's nice to have a friendly wine, but how long does it last? No. I think since 2013, we discovered with the new owner, Greg, a winery in the Alps. And that has been fabulous. It's grown, big.
Yeah.
But I went there. It was hard to find. It was in a mountain. But I fell in love with the wine, and I knew that was going to be a winner. So, you have to know your wine before you have to have a palate, and you have a sensibility to. Also, you have to be very friendly with the winemaker. You have to use a lot of diplomacy because now everybody wants to, everybody wants to be represented and so on, but who is going to be good. I think you have to understand that most now, of course, the winery speaks a little English, they can understand the market, they come on visit and so on. But, there is no room for everybody. And so it's like everything. It's not only wine. It's the way the world goes around. But we have more and more people drinking wine. That is for sure. And during COVID-19, the increase in sales in retail has been booming.
Yeah.
People go home and they bring a bottle of wine. They can go out to a restaurant, so they drink at home. And they drink more than in a restaurant because I think the price is better also.
Oh, really?
No, but I mean, the price, the price on the wine list is higher than when you buy it in the store. So people are realizing now that they can buy wines and it's good for the retail. It's very good. So we hope the restaurants are going to resurface very soon because I can't wait to eat out. I've been cooking for a year.
Well, you have a good dinner reservation on Friday at least, so that's a start. And I want to ask you one question because you're such an iconic woman in the wine industry. And the piece of advice, or what is one piece of advice that you would give the next generation of female leaders in the wine industry?
I think there are a lot of space for the young woman. They have to be well prepared, well schooled in business, and very patient for the progress, and also be ready to work very hard because it's not only the bottle they look at you for your knowledge, your presentation, your passion. If you can send the message to your buyer, then you'll be successful. That's what I say. But there's a lot of I tell you something. I think women will be more successful than men in a way because we know what to say to a winery. You don't want to hurt their feeling. And but men, when they deal with people, with other male, if somebody said something wrong, they just say, well, I don't like it. I don't. Women, we don't care. it's the way it is. Okay. And you know, there is the approach is very, very different. Very different. I think male in the wine business, in wineries, are very receptive to women that knows our business, is very low temper, and off we go.
I mean, the word you used was diplomatic or diplomacy, and I think that's so key and so well attuned to your extensive experience. And I want
yes.
I'll ask one more question and then we'll wrap it up. But I know in the past decade, since kind of stepping away from your importing business, you've become a filmmaker, and I assume that was a big change for you. But is there another dream project you'd like to pursue in the future?
No, I don't have any dream project except I want to fly out of San Francisco to meet my friends in New York, like Acker friends. I want to go to France, visit my wineries casually. I want to go to restaurant. I've been traveling in 2019 like crazy because I wanted to see part of the world I always dreamt. I went to Antarctica, I went to Africa, and and I had terrific experience. And then finally, at the early 2019, I went to Jordan, on Egypt, and I came back just through the door before the COVID, or it had already started, but I didn't get it. Yeah. So I got it. My travel was out of my system for a year, but now it starts to come back, and I like to move around. And maybe, I like to go to Austria. I've never been, I visited a little bit Germany, but I like to go to Austria and taste some wine. I've been to Italy also. Spain, I love. I mean, there's a lot
well
to do.
It sounds like travel was the way that you kind of got in the door of the wine industry. And I think that's what you're looking most to get back to. And Martine, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today and hear just a few of your legendary stories and your experiences in the wine world. And I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time with us. And thank you for celebrating Women's History Month with Acker. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Of course. See you soon and enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.